real quick, what I'm going to try and cover for you as some priorities is just sort of some common mistakes that people do when they're working with their finances. We're talking about building good relationships with our money, how to be confident about your future, and how students can partner to expand financial education, and again, what the state law requires. So not in that particular order, but those are some of the things that I'm going to try and cover for you. And again, I will jump around a little bit based on the group, and I do want this to be an engaging time, so there are going to be some things I'm going to ask you to do. So hopefully everybody has a pen handy and a blank sheet of paper, because I will ask you to do some things along the way. So the first thing that I like to think about when I'm engaging with someone, when I'm trying to influence someone, the very first thing I like to do is I like to ask these three questions. I call those my triangle of truth. The first thing I talk about is self-awareness. Basically, who am I? Who am I? Understand yourself, because who you are brings a certain perspective of truth with you. Who am I? The second thing that I recommend is we look at this aspect of self-advocacy. Self-advocacy. What do I need? What do I need? Right? And so what do I need to be successful? What do I need to thrive? And then finally, self-efficacy. What can I do? So if I understand who I am, right, and I get all the things that I need, then what is possible to achieve? Now, as student leaders, what I want you to do is drop the self in front of all of those things and change the I to the we, right? So who are we, right? What do we need, and what can we do? So my goal is to give you guys perspective, because when you go and you speak, you're speaking for a whole lot of people, and legislators have a set of interests that they're already sort of coming in with, and so the things that you talk about, they have a way of sort of glomming to and hearing those, just like most of us do, and we use those to justify our priorities, our values, the other things that are going on. And so my goal here isn't to try and get you to have a certain perspective or to have a certain set of priorities. My goal is for you to understand how the process works, so you have as much context in those conversations as you can, so that you can have well-informed decisions. So one of the things I want to mention here is financial aid. And Rochelle did a great job, and so I'm not going to try and sort of revisit what financial aid is. But financial aid is basically money that you receive from various sources to help cover your cost of going to college. For example, at WSU, over 70% of students receive some form of financial aid. So this is a broad common interest that lots of people are dependent on and are interested in, and they want to know how to use it as best as possible. With that being said, though, when I'm on financial aid, oftentimes I'm on a fixed income, right? And so when I'm on a fixed income, we talked about this a little bit earlier, I have to figure out, how do I make my dollar stretch? How do I sort of make the most of it? And so there's lots of things that we want to do for ourselves, and one of those things is we generally want to have some financial goals. So you personally, maybe as an organization, you have financial goals, but what are the things you want to do in the future? Or some people, anybody want to go to graduate school? Does anybody hope that as part of their future? Anybody who doesn't own a house wants to buy a house at some point in time? Maybe there's an unpaid internship you want to take. Like I did an internship for U.S. Senator Herb Kohl when I was an undergraduate student. I didn't get paid for that, but it was a huge experience that impacted my life, and my financial stability impacts whether or not I can take advantage of those opportunities or not. Studying abroad. Maybe at some point you want to be able to write a book. You don't want to have to work so many hours a week that you don't have time to do those things. So student debt has got to be this really sort of big image that we see, that there's this huge amount of debt out there, and sort of the current narrative is that basically college students are fairly irresponsible, and they don't understand anything about their money, and someone needs to inform and enlighten them about the things that are going on with their money, and they don't sort of understand how these things are going, and they're all going out and buying lattes. Now, is there a sector or a portion of our population where that's true? Absolutely. But there is an extreme that's sort of being talked about, that's sort of being sort of argued, and so we want to figure out sort of where does normal lie. So for example, at Washington State University, the average student debt at the point of graduation has been under $25,000 for the past decade. The national average is around $30,000 for an undergraduate degree. So let's clarify, for an undergraduate degree. And the state of Washington has been very progressive with that. What we have noticed, though, is a larger number of students who are borrowing. So as those costs went up, there were more people engaged in the borrowing process, and that's an important thing for us to be aware of and to look at. So what I'd like to mention to you is the reason that finances are so important is all of these things here, that financial stresses, and Rochelle mentioned it a little bit, have been shown to have impact on all these things, and there's lots of research out there. This is part of my doctoral studies, but lowering academic performance has had an impact. Lowering the number of courses that you have, and when Rochelle mentioned that, one of the things I wanted to point out to you is when students drop the number of credits that they're taking, yes, they delay the amount of time that it's going to take for them to begin earning their permanent salary or their wage and that kind of stuff, but it's generally not any cheaper to live. If you think about that, it costs so much for those, for the quarter or for that time period that you're in school. That's sort of a fixed cost that you don't have a lot of control over, even if you are taking a couple less credits. And so one of the things that we've tried to do is try to figure out how to help students so that they can leverage taking as many credits as they can. And then also, depending on your school, there's generally sort of a fixed cost, right? Like once I get to a certain number of credits, then I don't pay anything extra for those credits. And so we want to make sure that people are maximizing those opportunities because they become incredibly expensive. This has a direct impact on serving state need grant when we think about the idea that, for example, when some of my students haven't been able to be served, they have to pick up extra hours at Walmart. Okay, and so when I go from working 10 hours a week to 30 hours a week, it impacts how many credits I can take, just practically speaking. Okay, so this is some information I thought you might find a bit interesting. And so this is from the National Financial Capacity Study, the NFCS. It suggests that students did not fully understand what they were getting into when they took out their loans, where only 38% said that they had calculated in advance what their payment was going to be. And I'll talk about what the state legislature has tried to do to address this. But this is one of the things, and I don't know if anecdotally you guys can say that that's necessarily my experience, and we can talk about lots of reasons why maybe that's the case. But when you took out your last loan, and we know that loans are certainly an important part of our education, how much did you think about what will that monthly payment look like in the future? How is that going to all add up? Another question on the survey came up was if you could go through the process of financing your education all over again, you would take the same course of action or make changes. And so we see here in the purple, the vast majority of students are suggesting that they would make changes in several parts of what they did, and then a smaller portion said they would make the same decisions, and others were undecided. They didn't know. Another question was, when you first enrolled in school, you may have the idea of how much you expected to borrow in student debt. Did you borrow more or less than you originally anticipated? And so again, these are just some interesting questions that came up that sort of show us this issue and this problem. And the survey was done in 2016.